Hey everyone, welcome into this edition of the Mazzocco Guitars YouTube channel video. New and improved YouTube channel. We're trying to revamp things here. We're going to try to be more consistent with producing some interesting content for you, and I think you're going to enjoy what we have in store. We already have several videos already recorded and in the editing stages, ready to go. I tell you what, I wanted to start out with this one because what we have here, it's a basic Charvel acoustic guitar, not a whole lot going on, but for video purposes I think it's really interesting because what we're going to do, it's a little bit of mod, a little bit of repair, and a little bit of setup. So it's three of the four things that we do here. So just to play catch up real quick, a few things that have sort of changed since the last time we've put out any videos. We still are building the custom handmade guitars, the Mazzocco guitars from our Mazzocco Guitars workshop. Today I'm actually shooting this video from Palin Music Center in Joplin, which is where I am also the repair technician here. I do a lot of the work here, and I thought, what a great opportunity. I have all these instruments coming in. I'm going to go ahead and start putting together some videos of the work that we do here and put those out, because I think it's really an enjoyable thing to watch. So at Mazzocco Guitars, the things that we like to focus on, of course, are building guitars, and we also do modifications and repairs and setups, maintenance, stuff like that. So going back to this one again, that's why I want to do this, because this is really three out of those four big things that we do. We've got some mod, we've got some repair, and we've got some setup. So let's go ahead and dig into it. So what we have here is a Charvel Jackson acoustic electric guitar. So a few things that we're going to do is, of course, we're going to change the strings and do a full basic setup. A couple other things that we're going to do is they wanted to change out these tuners. These were just some import rebranded Charvel tuners that are on here, and we're going to go ahead and put these Gotohs from All Parts on here, and they're also in black to go with the sparkly black finish that's on this guitar. And then also we'll be able to see it a little bit better when we take the strings and everything out. But there's also a crack in the bridge, a crack that goes right between each of the bridge pins right here. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to that point. So the first thing that I like to do when I'm doing any kind of setup work is I want to get some measurements of the guitar before I ever start. And so that's what I've done. I write them down here. Let's get the chart. So here's what we've got. Coming in this guitar, I like to measure the low E and the high E and the relief. And then that kind of gives me a pretty good idea of where we're starting and then where we want to get. So what we have is we have on the low E, we have 120 thousandths of an inch. And then we have a string height on the high E of 90 thousandths of an inch. So all of that is considerably high action, that more than you would want on an acoustic guitar. You know, one of the things that a lot of times people like to do when they have high action is just start torquing on the truss rod. Don't do that. In the case of this guitar, actually with the action that we have, our truss rod is only about 11 thousandths of an inch, which maybe some people might think is a little bit high if you play with a really light touch and you like a really flat fretboard. Honestly, that's kind of the margin that I would shoot for, is about somewhere between 10 to 14 thousandths of an inch. That's how I would set it up. So we don't want to go messing with the truss rod on this. There's other things that we're going to do to try to fix this, and we'll get to that when we get to the setup. So first things first, let's go ahead and take the strings off. Alright, so the first thing we'll address is the issue with the bridge here. Now, what they've done, the customer already told me that they noticed that the bridge was cracking in between the bridge pins. And so, you know, you have that a lot of times, and it's just this grain line that runs right straight across here. That's going to be sort of a weak spot. And then, so that can be a little prone to cracking. What he wanted to do was, he asked if we should just pull this bridge off and make a new one and replace it. There's really no need at all to do that, because there's no sign at all of the bridge lifting behind here. Otherwise, this bridge is in really good shape. And what he did was he came in here and he said that he didn't take the bridge pins out, but he did just dab a little drop of super glue right in here. A lot of times you want to be careful when somebody starts kind of doing some repair work for you and then bring it in. In this case, this is not a problem. In fact, I even told him this is not that dissimilar to what I would have done myself. All we're going to do with this really is I want to clean it up, and I want to just kind of do a little bit of an inspection and make sure that that the work that is done here is going to hold, and if we need to do anything else. And maybe I might actually blend a little bit of sawdust in there just to kind of try to hide that glue up just a little bit. So here's a closer shot here of what is going on. You see right here is where the bridge cracked, and so they just built up some super glue in here just to strengthen that up and keep it from cracking anymore. So I'm going to start out with some 220 sandpaper here and just scuff the top of it, because that really helps me to see where the glue is as compared to when it's flush with the wood. Because now we're going to take just a regular utility knife blade and use that as a scraper. By the way, if you don't like the sound of scraping, you might want to have your mute button ready for a lot of these videos, because there's a lot of scraping that's going to be going on. Alright, so in doing this, I can see there's a couple of little areas, especially here and here, also here, where the super glue isn't completely leveled up to the top of the bridge. So what I'm going to do is, since I sanded that, and I'm letting that sawdust or that sanding dust sit in those little cracks, and now I'm going to use that as a base to add a little bit more super glue in there. Just drop a little drop in there and then let that harden on top of that sawdust. And scrape it down again. So that looks pretty good. I like that a lot. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and put some oil on there. And while we're at it, just as part of the setup, I'm going to go ahead and put some oil on the fretboard as well to keep it good and healthy. Alright, so now let's turn our attention to changing out the tuners. So we'll start out by removing this one screw that's on the back of each one of them. Alright, so we've got all the old tuners off. Ideally, what you want to do is just be able to take the new tuners and drop them right back in where the old tuners were. This doesn't always work because tuners, you know, they're made by different manufacturers, different parts of the world, so you never know. Standards may be different, different places, and the measurements could be different. So what you want to do is, when you're ordering your tuners, the easiest thing is to try to make sure that they match up with the holes that you have for your pegs, and also any of the screw holes on the back. So you notice here on these originals, they have sort of this offset diagonal screw, just one screw, and then the other is held on with the screw-in style bushing and washer. So I ordered the same kind, the same style, but still there's no guarantee that everything's going to match up just right. When it doesn't, that means you're going to have to do possibly some plugging of holes and re-drilling of holes, making new holes, or maybe even just making some holes bigger. In this case, we're going to see what we have here. I feel pretty good about this, but let's go ahead and find out what happens. So let's just take the washer, put that on the the screw-in bushing and take our tuner, put it in the hole. That seems to fit right. Alright, so don't tighten it down, but just kind of snug it a little bit so it doesn't fall out. And now we turn it over, and this is where we find out. And look, there's our original hole right there. That'll be real nice and easy to just take one of our new screws that comes with this set and just screw that right in. Tighten up the nut and just do that on the other 5. And there we go. We have a new set of tuners on this guitar. We've got the bridge fixed up, we've got the fretboard oiled up, and now we are ready to start working on the setup. So the strings that this customer has chosen is a medium gauge string, which is a little bit heavier than what was on there before. So we're going to go ahead and put these on and see what sort of changes that makes to the way that the guitar reacts to the string tension. So real quick here, something I noticed. I was going to skip this whole part of putting the strings back on, but when I was putting each of the bridge pins back in, I noticed none of them really want to go down. This one's sticking up quite a bit, and they're all doing that, it seems like. So that's a pretty good indication to me that these holes are not reamed out enough. In fact, I'm pretty sure that what happened here, the reason it cracked in the first place, was that it wasn't a good fit with these bridge pins, but they were just pushed and wedged down in there really tight, and then that put a lot of pressure on this space between the bridge pins until it just gave. So what I'm doing is I'm going through with my pinhole reamer here, and I'm just checking this to make sure that the bridge pins go in, but they're not having to be forced in. Alright, those are fitting a lot better, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on with restringing the guitar. So now it's strung up to pitch with the new strings on there, and we're going to see where we're setting now in all of our measurements. Alright, so overall we've gone up about 0.010 of an inch, which is to be expected putting a heavier gauge of string on here. And I can see in our relief where we were just barely able to get this 11/1000 feeler gauge under here. Now it slides through pretty effortlessly. So in fact now we're up to about 15/1000, which for me is just a little bit too high. So I'm going to go ahead and make an adjustment on the truss rod to bring that relief down a little bit. Alright, so now we've got that adjusted back to about 10/11,000 of an inch. I like that. But we are still just strong of 120 thousandths and right about 90 thousandths. So we're right back where we started with the old string gauge. So next we're going to check the nut height. So I'm just going to take and fret it right here at the 3rd fret, and I like to look to see for how much play there is right there. There's a little bit. Yeah, and it gets worse as we go up here. So there's some room to take some height out of the nut slots here. Something else I noticed when I was installing these strings too is that especially here on the heavier gauge strings toward the lower end, well, you see that? You see how hard that is for me to take in and out of there? And you hear it? Yeah. No, that shouldn't do that at all. In fact, it needs to just sit in there nice and comfortably, but without being all loose and sloppy. What this is going to do, set up like this, is it's going to make it really, really difficult for tuning stability because that string is being pinched in that nut slot right there. So we're going to widen that out a little bit, as well as bring it down just a little bit deeper. pretty good. It's pretty close, but it looks like we can come down just a little more. When I get this close especially, I want to only do maybe about 4 or 5 strokes at a time, because it's a lot easier to go down just a little bit more, and it's a lot harder to bring it back up just a little bit more. That can be done for sure, but hopefully, the idea is I want to leave that for another video for when I have to do that. Alright, so now I've got all the nut slots filed down. They're widened and they're deepened so that everything is real good here. And so now the next thing to check is the saddle. But we need to figure out, okay, so how much saddle do we need to take off? Well, let's see. If our string action at the 12th fret for our low E is 120 thousandths, and let's say, for example, we want to take it down to 80 thousandths. Well, that's a difference of 40 thousandths. So how far do we need to come down with our saddle? It's easy. 40 thousandths. What? No, that's not right. Why not? Well, think about it. What we're measuring is we are measuring the string action at the 12th fret, which is half of our scale. The full length of the scale goes from the nut to the bridge. So that means that whatever our height is here, it would theoretically be double at the saddle. So what we need to do is take whatever we want to lower it at the 12th fret times 2. And that's how much we need to take off the saddle. So if we want to come down 40 thousandths of an inch, then how much do we need to take off of our saddle? 80 thousandths of an inch. That's quite a bit, actually. But we're going to take that all off, and actually we're probably going to go a little bit more than that, because really I want to try to shoot for around 75 thousandths of an inch for this guitar. But we're going to go ahead and measure that off of the bottom, and we're going to take that off of the bottom of the saddle and just lower the whole thing down into the bridge, bringing the strings down with it. Alright, so I've got my caliper set to 90 thousandths of an inch. So that gives me that extra 10 thousandths that I was looking for. So I want to bring that down to about 70 thousandths. So we'll go ahead and mark this. Alright, so you can see this line right here that I've got scribed, that is our 90 thousandths line. That's what we want to take this down to. It may seem like a lot, and that's because it is. This is a pretty extreme case where we need to take a lot off of this saddle. Most of the time when we take some off of the saddle, you're looking at maybe 20 thousandths, 40 thousandths here and there. But this is a really good chunk, but we've also got a really tall saddle to play with, so we're in good shape here still. So since we have so much to take off of here, I'm just going to hog off a whole bunch of it with my nut and saddle files in the vise, and then I'll come back and smooth it on sandpaper like you're probably used to seeing. Alright, so now that I've got the bulk of that taken off with the file, now I'm going to go ahead and smooth it all up and get it nice and flat and square, and I'll do that on the sandpaper. I'll use a Sharpie to mark the bottom of it. and that lets me know if there are any high spots that I'm still not getting. So my eyeball is telling me that we're probably going to be hitting on the outsides first and then coming down on the middle. And just a couple of strokes real quick are going to tell us, yep, that's what's happening. So what I want to do is I want to keep doing this and keep it level and keep it square to the sides until I have that blue line completely gone. Now some of you may be wondering, why do I do this by hand, and why don't I have one of those little nut and saddle shapers that StewMac sells? It kind of looks like the little metal car with the bearings, and you clamp it in there and you just roll it on there until all the wheels are touching. I'll tell you the problem with that little device is that I don't have one yet. I think that's a pretty cool little device, and I definitely want to go ahead and get one of those. But until I do, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it. And there we go. We are getting that line. There's just a little bit right there. I'm just going to go ahead and get the rest of that and make sure that we are up to our line. I'll tell you what, when I get that, one thing I am looking forward to is not sanding the tips of my fingers anymore. Sometimes you get these things down so low, you start scraping tips of your fingers on the sandpaper. Alright, so there it is. Alright, let's put our saddle back in. It's definitely a lot lower now. Okay, so we've reached the end here. I've got the whole thing put back together, strung up, tuned back up to pitch, tested it, and it's playing great now. Got the action just where I want it. On the low E, we're down to 75 thousandths of an inch, and on the high E, we're down to about 50 thousandths of an inch, which in my opinion is more than you can ask for usually on an acoustic guitar. But that's it for today. If you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, be sure, please do hit that like, subscribe, and hit the bell for the notifications, because we've got a lot of stuff coming, some stuff that I already know that we've recorded that is some really cool, interesting stuff that we've done here in the shop. So stay tuned and join us back here next time, and until then, we'll see you later.